He looked at her uniform, then at her downcast eyes and smiled. To Jamie Hunt, the server standing before him wasn't his ex-wife. She was evidence. Proof that he'd won, that he'd escaped, that he'd traded up. He thought that by switching to Korean, crude, vulgar phrases he'd memorized from a language app, he could strip her of whatever dignity she had left in front of Angel and everyone watching. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. He didn't know that the woman holding his menu had once been fluent enough to translate for diplomats, or that the man sitting alone at table 7 understood every syllable. The few words Eliza was about to speak wouldn't just silence Jamie. They would trigger a chain of events that would dismantle his entire world and pull her into a darkness she never knew existed. This is the story of how arrogance met its reckoning, and how revenge tasted like salvation and damnation in equal measure. Welcome to Dark Tales and Forbidden Romance, where power meets passion and revenge is a dish best served cold. If stories of strong women, dangerous men, and morally complex love captivate you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and let's dive into Eliza's descent into darkness together. The air inside Hanok, Manhattan's most exclusive Korean fusion restaurant, smelled of gochujang glaze, imported soju, and new money pretending to be old. For Eliza Kent, however, it mostly smelled of desperation. Eliza tugged at the collar of her striped button-down shirt, which felt too tight around her throat despite being perfectly tailored. It was 7:45 p.m. on a Friday. The dinner rush was building to its crescendo. A symphony of hushed conversations in multiple languages, the delicate percussion of chopsticks against ceramic, the soft rustle of silk and cashmere as Manhattan's elite settled into their seats. Each table represented more money than Eliza would see in 6 months of tips. Table 3 needs fresh banchan. Table 9 wants the sommelier. Move, Kent. Move. The command came from Marcus Chin, the floor manager, a man who viewed any display of emotion as a professional failure. He was currently stationed near the host stand, his sharp eyes cataloging every server's movement like a general surveying a battlefield. On it, Marcus, Eliza said, her voice carefully neutral. She lifted a tray of small dishes, kimchi, seasoned spinach, marinated radish, ignoring the burning ache in her lower back. She'd been on her feet for 8 hours. Her black flats, bought on clearance from a store in Brooklyn, were developing a hole near the toe she tried to hide with shoe polish. Eliza Kent was 28 years old. To the patrons of Hanok, she was invisible architecture. She was the hands that delivered their food, the voice that explained the menu, the shadow that absorbed their impatience without complaint. They didn't see the concealer hiding sleepless nights beneath her eyes. They certainly didn't know that 18 months ago, Eliza had been a doctoral candidate in East Asian linguistics at Columbia University, specializing in Korean sociolinguistics and translation theory. One of 3 students selected for a prestigious fellowship in Seoul. Then came the divorce. Jamie draining their joint account. The debt collectors. The fellowship she couldn't accept because she was too busy trying to survive the financial wreckage her ex-husband had left behind. She had traded the seminar room for the dining room, her research for tips, her future for rent money. She did what she had to do to keep the creditors from destroying what little she had left. Eliza. Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts. VIPs at table 12. Anniversary couple. Handle them personally. Eliza glanced toward the entrance and felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. The host, a nervous young woman named Sophie, was guiding a couple through the amber-lit dining room. The man walked ahead, which told Eliza everything. He moved like someone who believed the world should part for him. Charcoal suit, perfectly fitted. Hair styled with the kind of casual precision that cost $200. A smile that looked warm from a distance but turned cruel up close. Jamie Hunt. Her ex-husband. And draped on his arm, laughing at something he'd whispered, was Angel Jolie. Red dress cut low. Blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders. The Instagram influencer Jamie had been sleeping with for the last 6 months of their marriage. The woman he'd left Eliza for the same week he'd emptied their savings. Eliza's hands went numb. The tray trembled. Problem. Marcus appeared at her elbow, his expression glacial. No. The word came out steady despite the screaming in her skull. No problem. She watched Jamie scan the room, his eyes moving across the tables with predatory assessment. He was looking for an audience. He'd always needed witnesses for his cruelty, people to watch him win. When his gaze finally landed on her, Eliza saw the recognition flicker across his face. And then worse, the smile that followed. So delighted. Vicious. He'd known she worked here. He'd come deliberately. Sophie seated them in Eliza's section. Of course. Jamie must have requested it, probably slipped the host cash to ensure he'd be served by his ex-wife. Angel settled into her chair, checking her reflection in a compact mirror, oblivious or indifferent to the violence about to unfold. Eliza forced her feet to move. Each step toward table 12 felt like walking toward an execution. She could feel other servers watching, sensing the tension without understanding it. Could feel Marcus's eyes on her back, waiting for her to fail. But it was the man at table 7 who made her pause. He sat alone, perfectly still in a charcoal suit that looked handmade. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful. He wasn't eating. Wasn't looking at his phone. He was watching the room with the kind of attention that suggested he saw everything, missed nothing, forgot even less. Han Suk-jin. She'd heard the servers whisper about him. A consultant for international business. Kring. Impossibly wealthy. Dined alone every Friday at the same table. Tipped in cash, never spoke beyond what was necessary, and radiated the kind of quiet power that made even Marcus nervous. As Eliza approached Jamie's table, she felt Han's gaze shift. Land on her. Then track toward Jamie and Angel. Well. Jamie's voice carried, meant to be heard. Look who's serving us tonight, Angel. What are the odds? Angel giggled, her phone already in her hand. Eliza recognized the angle she was filming. Eliza stopped at the table's edge, her spine straight, her face professionally blank. Good evening. Welcome to Hannock. Can I start you with something to drink? Jamie leaned back in his chair, his smile widening. You know, babe, he said to Angel, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I've been learning Korean. Thought I'd impress you. Let's order in Korean, shall we? Angel clapped her hands together. Oh my god, babe, yes. That's so hot. Eliza's blood turned to ice. She knew what was coming. Could see it in the glitter of malice in Jamie's eyes. This wasn't about ordering food. This was about humiliation. Public. Inescapable. Final. Jamie looked directly at Eliza, and in halting, deliberately crude Korean, he opened his mouth and struck. Eliza Kent had learned to measure her life in increments of pain. The first 2 hours of any shift, her feet merely ached. A dull throb she could ignore while she smiled at customers who never looked at her face. By hour 4, the burning started, radiating from her arches through her ankles. By hour 6, which was where she stood now, every step felt like walking on broken glass wrapped in silk. She moved through Hannock's dining room like a ghost threading between worlds. To her left, a tech CEO negotiated a merger in Mandarin while his companion scrolled through her phone, bored. To her right, 2 socialites dissected someone's failed marriage over $23 cocktails, their laughter sharp as knives. Eliza refilled water glasses, delivered appetizers, cleared plates, all while doing the math that never stopped running in her head. Rent was due in 6 days. The minimum payment on the visa Jamie had maxed out before disappearing was $317. She had $412 in her checking account. If she skipped groceries and walked the 40 blocks home instead of taking the subway, she might make it work. 18 months ago, she'd been Dr. Kent in progress. Columbia's rising star in East Asian linguistics. She'd had a fellowship waiting in Seoul, a dissertation on Korean honorific systems that made her advisor weep with pride, and a future so bright she'd needed sunglasses. Then Jamie had come home with divorce papers, emptied their joint account, and vanished with Angel Jolie, a woman whose entire career consisted of posting thirst traps and unboxing luxury products she hadn't paid for. The debt he'd left in Eliza's name had killed her fellowship, killed her research, killed every version of herself she'd spent a decade building. Now she was this, a woman in a too-tight uniform, carrying overpriced food to people who wouldn't remember her face 30 seconds after she left their table. Marcus appeared at her elbow, his expression carved from ice. Table 12. Anniversary VIPs. Make it special. Eliza turned toward the entrance and the world stopped. Jamie Hunt stood in the doorway, backlit by the amber glow of the foyer. He looked exactly as he had the day he'd served her papers. Expensive suit, expensive smile, expensive confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences. Angel clung to his arm, her red dress a slash of color against the restaurant's muted elegance, her laugh too loud, too performative. They weren't here by accident. Jamie's eyes found hers across the room, and the smile that spread across his face was pure predation. He'd known. He'd planned this. Probably bribed Sophie at the host stand to seat them in her section. Eliza's hands trembled as she reached for her order pad. Across the dining room she felt another gaze, heavier, sharper, assessing. The man at table 7 had stopped eating. Han Suk-jin, the mysterious regular who spoke 3 words per visit and tipped like a king, was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Sophie guided Jamie and Angel directly to table 12. Eliza's section. Of course. Jamie settled into his chair, arranged his napkin with theatrical precision, and looked at Eliza like she was dinner. "This," he announced to Angel, his voice carrying, "is going to be fun." Eliza's legs carried her to table 12 on autopilot, muscle memory overriding the screaming in her brain that begged her to run. Jamie watched her approach the way a cat watches a wounded bird, patient, amused, already tasting victory. "Good evening," she managed, her voice professionally neutral. "Welcome to Hannock. Can I start you with Eliza?" Jamie said her name like he was savoring it, rolling it around his mouth. "Eliza Kent. My God, is that really you?" Angel's perfectly microbladed eyebrows shot up in performed surprise. "Wait, babe, you know her?" "Yo her." Jamie leaned back, his smile widening. "Sweetheart, I was married to her." The tables nearby went quiet. Eliza felt the attention shift, felt the weight of strangers' eyes cataloging her scuffed shoes, her cheap uniform, the exhaustion she couldn't quite hide. This was what Jamie wanted, an audience for her humiliation. "Small world," Eliza said flatly. "What can I get you to drink?" "Oh, don't be like that." Jamie's tone was honey over glass. "It's so good to see you. You look like you're working hard." "That's wonderful. I always said you had a strong work ethic, didn't I?" He turned to Angel. "Back when we were married she was doing some kind of, what was it, honey? Some degree thing." "Her PhD," Angel supplied, examining her nails. "You said she spent more time with books than with you." Right. All those languages." Jamie waved his hand dismissively. "I'm glad you found something more practical. More grounded, you know? Not everyone's cut out for academia." Each word was a precision strike. Eliza's fingers tightened on her order pad until the pen nearly snapped. She wanted to walk away. Wanted to pour water over his smug face. Wanted to scream that he'd stolen her future, that every failure he was mocking was a crime he'd committed. Instead she said, "Sparkling or still water?" "You always were a survivor," Jamie continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Even after everything, the divorce, the financial stuff, you just kept going. That's admirable, really." "The financial stuff." He said it like it was weather, not the debt he'd deliberately left in her name. Not the credit cards he'd maxed out, the fellowship she'd lost, the life he'd burned to ash. "I'll give you a moment with the menu," Eliza said, turning away before her composure shattered. "Oh, we're ready to order," Jamie called after her, his voice bright with malice. "But I thought we'd try something different tonight. Something authentic." Eliza stopped, turned back, met his eyes and saw the trap waiting. "I've been learning Korean," Jamie announced, loud enough for half the dining room to hear. Angel immediately pulled out her phone, angling it to capture the moment. Thought it would be fun to order in the native language. You know, show some cultural appreciation. Across the room, Eliza saw the man at table 7 set down his chopsticks. Han Suk-jin's attention had sharpened, his dark eyes fixed on Jamie with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. Jamie opened his mouth and the words that came out were Korean. Crude. Deliberate. Venomous. And every syllable was designed to destroy her. Jamie's Korean was atrocious. The pronunciation mangled, the tones all wrong, but the intent was unmistakable. Eliza's blood turned to ice as the words registered. "I want the worthless woman to bring food," he said in broken Korean, his accent so thick it was nearly incomprehensible. But Eliza understood. She'd spent 6 years studying this language, had dreamed in its syntax, had loved its elegant complexity. The stupid one, who failed at everything. Angel's phone was up, recording, her glossed lips curved in a delighted smile. Around them, the dining room had gone quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The other diners couldn't understand the words, but they understood the performance. The cruelty in Jamie's smile, the phone capturing Eliza's humiliation, the sport of watching someone be destroyed in public. Jamie continued, his butchered Korean growing more confident. This woman was my wife. Now she is nothing. She serves like a dog. He was mixing formal and informal registers, using words that were vulgar and childish, but the core message carved through clearly. You are worthless. You are beneath me. You failed. Marcus appeared at the edge of Eliza's vision, frozen, uncertain whether to intervene or protect the VIP customer. Other servers had stopped moving. The tech CEO at table 3 stared openly. The socialites at table 5 leaned in, hungry for drama. This was the moment Jamie had orchestrated. Proof of his victory, filmed for posterity, witnessed by Manhattan's elite. Eliza standing mute and helpless while he dismantled what remained of her dignity in a language he assumed she couldn't understand. Angel zoomed in on Eliza's face, capturing every micro-expression. "Babe, this is amazing content," she whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. Eliza's hands shook. She could walk away. Stay silent. Keep her job. Survive. That's what she'd been doing for 18 months. Surviving, swallowing humiliation, making herself small. It was safer. Smarter. But something in her chest cracked open, and suddenly she was 18 months younger, standing in their apartment while Jamie told her she was too academic, too serious, not fun anymore. She was 23, defending her thesis while professors nodded in respect. She was 16, falling in love with Korean dramas and teaching herself Hangul from library books. She was every version of herself Jamie had tried to erase. Her eyes lifted from her notepad, in the room, and landed on table 7. Han Suk-jin was watching her with absolute stillness. He hadn't moved, hadn't reacted visibly, but something in his expression had shifted. His dark eyes met hers across the dining room, and in them she saw, what? Recognition, understanding, permission. He inclined his head. A single minimal nod. So slight that anyone else would have missed it. But Eliza saw, and something dormant inside her ignited. She turned back to Jamie, whose smile had grown wider, who thought he'd already won. Angel's phone was still recording. The entire restaurant was watching. Eliza took a breath, straightened her spine, and opened her mouth. When she spoke, it was in Korean. Perfect, flawless, aristocratic Korean that made Jamie's attempt sound like a child playing with broken toys. And the room exploded. Eliza's Korean flowed like silk over steel, each syllable precise and devastatingly clear. She said, her sole accent flawless, aristocratic. "I would be honored to assist you with your order." Jamie's smile faltered. Angel's phone dipped slightly. "But first," Eliza continued in Korean, her voice carrying across the silent dining room, "perhaps I should clarify what you actually said. For those who don't speak Korean," she switched to English, her tone professorial. "This gentleman just attempted to order using phrases he clearly memorized phonetically without understanding their meaning." She turned to address the room, her exhaustion replaced by something incandescent. "He tried to call me worthless, but he used, in the wrong context. He actually called the food worthless. He attempted to say I was stupid but mispronounced, so badly he said, which isn't even a word. It roughly translates to, I have eaten stupidity." A laugh burst from someone at table 9. Eliza didn't stop. "He mixed formal and informal registers so inappropriately that he essentially told me, his elder in this context, to bring food like a dog, while simultaneously using honorific verb endings that suggest I'm royalty." Her eyes locked on Jamie's reddening face. "In attempting to humiliate me, he actually spent the last 2 minutes calling himself obscene things while begging me very politely to help him." The dining room erupted. Laughter rippled through the tables. Not cruel but astonished, delighted. The tech CEO actually applauded. Marcus stood frozen, his expression caught between horror and awe. Angel's phone was down now, her mouth open. "Babe. You," Jamie started, his voice strangled. But Eliza wasn't finished. She switched back to Korean, her voice dropping into something older, more elegant. She began reciting each word deliberate. Even in mud, flowers bloom. After the storm passes, the sky becomes clearer. What cannot be broken is not the tree, but the spirit that rises again. The silence that followed was absolute. At table 7, Han Suk-jin had risen to his feet. He was watching Eliza with an expression that made her breath catch. Intense, measuring, almost predatory. Something had shifted in the air between them, a current that made her skin prickle. "That's a classical poem," Eliza said quietly, returning to English. "About dignity in adversity. My apologies for the interruption. Now, shall I tell you about our specials this evening, or would you prefer to order in English?" Jamie's face had gone from red to purple. He shoved back from the table so violently his chair screeched. "You think you're so fucking smart, sir." Marcus finally found his voice. "Please lower your—" "She stole from us." Jamie's shout cut through the room. He reached for his jacket, patted his pockets frantically. "My wallet. It's gone." "She took it while she was." His eyes gleamed with vicious triumph as he turned to Marcus. "Pick her. Check her pockets. She's a thief." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Eliza's triumph evaporated as every eye in the dining room swiveled toward her with new suspicion. The laughter died. The atmosphere shifted from vindication to judgment in a heartbeat. "I didn't," Eliza started, but Jamie was already in motion. "Angel, check your purse," he commanded, his voice pitched for maximum drama. "See if anything else is missing." Angel made a show of rifling through her designer bag, her expression transforming into theatrical shock. "Babe, my bracelet. The Cartier you gave me, it's gone." Marcus's face went white. "Mr. Hunt, I assure you our staff is thoroughly vetted." "Then you won't mind checking them." Jamie's smile was razor-sharp. He'd pivoted from humiliated to righteous victim in seconds, reclaiming control of the narrative. "She was at our table. She has access." Her pockets. The Texio was filming now. The socialites whispered behind their hands. This was better than the linguistic takedown. This was a crime, a scandal, content that would spread across social media within the hour. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. "I didn't take anything. I haven't touched." "Eliza." Marcus's voice was cold, professional, already calculating damage control. "Please step into the back. We'll sort this out quietly." "Quietly?" Jamie's voice rose. "She robbed us and you want to handle it quietly? Call the police. Call security. I want her arrested." This was it. Eliza could see her future collapsing in real time. Fired. Possibly arrested. Her name in a police report. The other restaurants wouldn't hire her. The debt would bury her. Everything she'd survived the last 18 months for, obliterated because Jamie needed to win. "Empty your pockets," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Now." Eliza's hands trembled as she reached for her apron. She knew what she'd find. Nothing. She'd taken nothing. But as her fingers slipped into the pocket, they brushed against something cold, metal, unfamiliar. No. She pulled out a delicate gold bracelet, diamonds catching the amber light. "Cartier. Unmistakable. Impossible." Angel gasped. "That's it. That's mine." "I didn't." The room was spinning. "He planted this, he—" "Save it." Marcus's voice was granite. "Security. Now." Jamie's smile was victorious, absolute. He'd won. He always won. The security guard was moving toward her. Other servers backed away. Eliza felt the walls closing in, felt 18 months of survival crumbling into nothing, felt the familiar weight of being crushed by someone else's cruelty. And then a voice cut through the chaos. Deep, calm, and absolutely commanding. "That won't be necessary." Every head turned. Han Suk-jin stood at table 7, his posture relaxed but his presence suddenly dominating the entire room. He moved toward them with the unhurried grace of an apex predator, each step deliberate, purposeful. Marcus actually took a step back. "Mr. Han, this doesn't concern." "It does." Han's dark eyes fixed on Jamie with an intensity that made the temperature drop. "Because I saw everything." Han moved through the dining room like a storm front, silent and inevitable. When he reached table 12, he bent down with fluid grace and retrieved something from beneath Jamie's chair. He straightened, holding a leather wallet between two fingers. Looking for this, Mr. Hunt? Jamie's face went slack. How did you? He was on the floor. Under your chair. Han's voice was quiet, conversational, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. It seems to have fallen when you staged your performance. Angel's hand flew to the bracelet still in Eliza's trembling fingers. Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. She'd been part of the setup, had slipped it into Eliza's apron during the manufactured collision at the table. Now wait just a... Jamie started, his voice rising. Jamie Hunt. Han pronounced the name like he was reading from a file. Mid-level portfolio manager at Sterling & Cross Financial. Recently divorced. Currently under internal investigation for discrepancies in client accounts totaling approximately $240,000. The color drained from Jamie's face. Who the fuck are you? Han ignored the question. You've been moving money through offshore accounts. Small amounts, carefully timed. You thought you were clever. His smile was cold enough to frost glass. You used your girlfriend's social security number to open 3 of the accounts. Put a condo in her name. A car. All purchased with funds that don't belong to you. Angel's head whipped toward Jamie. What is he talking about? The SEC received an anonymous tip 3 days ago, Han continued, his tone almost bored. By Monday, federal investigators will be examining every transaction you've made in the last 18 months. I imagine they'll find the evidence quite compelling. You don't know, Jamie's voice cracked. Han pulled out his phone. Dialed a number. The silence in the dining room was suffocating. Yes, he said in Korean, his eyes never leaving Jamie's face. The information we discussed. Send it now. All of it. Pause. Yes, including the account in the girlfriend's name. He ended the call. Slipped the phone back into his pocket. Looked at Marcus. I believe these guests are ready to leave. Security, Marcus said, his voice shaking. Please escort Mr. Hunt and his guest out. This is bullshit. Jamie's shout was desperate now, panicked. He's lying. He doesn't know anything. But he was already backing toward the door as 2 security guards approached. Angel grabbed her purse, her face pale, and bolted after him. The dining room watched in stunned silence as they disappeared through the entrance. The moment they were gone, the space erupted in whispered conversations. Marcus turned to Eliza, opening his mouth to speak, but Han raised a hand. Miss Kent stays, Han said quietly. She's done nothing wrong. In fact, he switched to Korean, his voice dropping into something intimate, dangerous. I'd like a moment of her time. If she's willing. Eliza's breath caught. Every instinct screamed warning, but she met his dark eyes and heard herself answer in Korean, her voice steady despite the adrenaline crashing through her veins. I'm listening. Han gestured to the empty chair at his table. Please. Sit. It wasn't a request. Eliza glanced at Marcus, who nodded frantically, then lowered herself into the seat across from Han. Up close, he was even more devastating. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, and eyes that saw far too much. He radiated control, the kind that came from never having to raise his voice because people were already afraid. You studied at Columbia, he said in Korean, his accent pure soul, educated, refined. East Asian linguistics. You were brilliant according to your published work. Then you disappeared. Eliza's throat tightened. How do you? I own Hannock. He gestured to the dining room around them. I own the building it's in. I own several other properties in Manhattan, and I have business interests in Seoul that require someone with very specific skills. He leaned forward slightly. I've been searching for someone like you for 6 months. Educated. Fluent. Capable of navigating both cultures with precision. Someone like me, Eliza repeated carefully, or me specifically? You specifically. I read your thesis on code switching in Korean business negotiations. It was exceptional. His eyes held hers. I need a cultural liaison. A translator who understands not just words but context, nuance, power dynamics. Someone who can sit in rooms where fortunes are made and destroyed and know which conversations to translate and which to forget. The implication settled over her like a silk shroud. What kind of business are we talking about? Import-export. Real estate. Consulting. His smile was slight, knowing. Some of my clients prefer discretion. Some of my transactions require careful handling. You would work directly with me. Travel between New York and Seoul. Handle sensitive negotiations. And if I see things that concern me, then you keep seeing them. His voice dropped lower, intimate and dangerous. Loyalty, Ms. Kent, is the only currency that matters in my world. I'm offering you $150,000 a year. Signing bonus of $50,000. I'll pay off your debts, all of them within the week. Housing provided. Travel expenses covered. The number hit her like a physical force. $150,000. Her debts erased. Freedom from the apartment with the broken heat, the endless calculations, the shame of watching Jamie win while she drowned. Why me? She whispered. Because you stood in front of that man and recited poetry while your world was ending. Han's eyes burned into hers. Because you're brilliant and desperate and you understand what it means to survive. And because, he switched to English, his accent barely perceptible, I need someone who won't break when things get complicated. Eliza's heart hammered. Every rational instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that men who destroyed people with phone calls and knew things they shouldn't didn't offer salvation without cost. But she was so tired of surviving, so tired of being powerless. When do I start? She heard herself say. Han's smile was slow, predatory, satisfied. Tomorrow. My driver will collect you at 8. He slid a business card across the table. One more thing, Miss Kent. Yes. Welcome to the shadows. 3 weeks into her new life, Eliza stood in a penthouse overlooking Central Park and realized she'd made a deal with the devil, and couldn't bring herself to regret it. The apartment Han provided was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble bathrooms, a kitchen she'd never cook in because they ate at restaurants most people couldn't afford to look at. Her debts had vanished overnight. Her bank account had numbers she'd never seen before. She wore clothes that cost more than a month of her old salary. But luxury had a price and she was learning to pay it. The meeting in Seoul had been her first glimpse behind the curtain. She'd translated a negotiation between Han and a shipping company executive, routine business talk until the executive tried to renegotiate terms. Han had smiled, said something in rapid Korean that made the man go pale, and within an hour the executive was signing whatever Han wanted. Later, Eliza learned the man's son had gambling debts to one of Han's associates. The choice had been simple: sign or the debts would be called in ways that couldn't be repaid in money. Last week she'd witnessed something worse. A restaurant owner who'd borrowed money and couldn't pay. He'd begged in Korean, sobbing, explaining his daughter's medical bills. Han had listened with perfect patience, then nodded to the 2 men flanking him. Eliza had looked away when she heard the crack of breaking bones, but she couldn't unhear the screaming. Afterward, Han had taken her to dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Ordered wine that cost $4,000 a bottle. Discussed classical Korean literature like the violence had never happened. You're troubled, he'd observed, his dark eyes reading her too easily. He had a daughter, Eliza had said quietly. He also had 6 months to pay. He chose to gamble instead. Han's voice held no emotion. In my world, choices have consequences. Always. She should have been horrified. Should have walked away. But when Han's hand had brushed hers across the table, when his gaze had lingered on her mouth, she'd felt heat spiral through her that had nothing to do with fear. The attraction between them had been building since that first night. Dangerous, magnetic, impossible to ignore. He watched her like she was the only person in any room. Listened when she spoke like her words were scripture. Touched her with a restraint that made her ache for him to stop restraining. 3 nights ago, after too much wine and adrenaline from a deal that had gone sideways, she'd kissed him in the back of his car. Han had responded like a man starving, his control shattering, his hands tangling in her hair. They'd barely made it to his apartment before clothes started disappearing. Now she was his translator, his lover, his accomplice. She was crossing lines she couldn't uncross, and the worst part was how alive it made her feel. Eliza's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the news. Your ex-husband. Her blood went cold. She pulled up a news site, scrolled and found the headline. Finance manager missing after FBI raid. Apartment found ransacked. Jamie Hunt's face stared from the screen. The article mentioned fraud, federal warrants, a girlfriend in custody. And a witness who claimed men in black suits had been asking questions about Jamie 3 days before he disappeared. Eliza was reading contracts in Han's study when she heard the glass shatter. Her body moved on instinct, diving behind the desk as footsteps thundered through the apartment. She reached for her phone, but a hand grabbed her hair, yanking her upward. Jamie's face was gaunt, wild-eyed, unrecognizable. He pressed something cold against her temple. A gun. You destroyed me, he hissed, his breath reeking of alcohol and desperation. The FBI, the accounts, everything, it all started after that night. After him. Spittle flew from his lips. You're fucking him, aren't you? The Korean guy. You let him ruin my life. Jamie, Eliza's voice was surprisingly steady. Put the gun down. Why? So you can watch me go to prison? So you can. The door exploded inward. Han's security team moved like shadows. 3 men in black, trained and lethal. They had Jamie disarmed and on the ground in seconds, his face pressed into the marble, the gun skittering away. Han entered last, his expression carved from ice. He looked at Eliza, checking for injuries, then at Jamie with something that transcended contempt. Take him to the car, Han said quietly in Korean. Wait for my instructions. The security team hauled Jamie up, his protests muffled. Han waved them toward the door, then turned to Eliza. The apartment fell silent except for her ragged breathing. Are you hurt? His hands framed her face, gentle despite the violence still crackling in the air. No. I'm fine. But she wasn't. Her hands were shaking. The weight of everything, the gun, Jamie's desperation, the ease with which Han's men had appeared, crashed over her. He broke in, brought a weapon, threatened your life. Han's voice was perfectly calm. I can make this very simple. 1 phone call. He disappears. No trial, no risk of him ever touching you again. Eliza looked into Han's dark eyes and saw the offer for what it was. Total protection, absolute power, and the final crossing of a line she could never uncross. This was who he was. A man who eliminated problems permanently. And he was offering to do it for her. Or, Han continued, reading her hesitation, we let the legal system handle him. The FBI already has enough to put him away. But courts are unpredictable. He might get a plea deal. Might walk in 5 years. Is there a third option? Eliza asked quietly. Han's lips curved slightly. Tell me. We give the FBI everything, all of it, everything you know about his fraud. We make sure he goes away for a long time. But he lives. She met Han's gaze. He lives knowing I won. That I'm here, powerful, free, while he rots in a cell. Death would be mercy. I want him to survive what he did to me. Han studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Genuine, almost proud. You're learning. Maybe that's what scares me. Good. He kissed her forehead. Fear means you're still human. 6 months later, Eliza stood in the conference room of Han's Seoul headquarters, conducting negotiations in 3 languages while executives twice her age hung on her every word. Jamie was serving 8 years in federal prison. Angel had testified against him for immunity. And Eliza? She was Han Suk-jin's partner. In business, in bed, in the shadows they both inhabited. She wore designer suits and wielded power like a blade. She'd reclaimed everything Jamie had stolen and built an empire on the ruins. But late at night, when Han's arms wrapped around her and the city glittered below, she wondered, had she won her life back or sold her soul? The answer, she suspected, was both. And she couldn't bring herself to regret it. And that's where Eliza's journey into the shadows ends. Or does it? If this story of revenge, redemption, and dangerous romance left you breathless, show some love by hitting that like button and subscribing for more dark, captivating tales. Comment below. Did Eliza make the right choice? Is she free or damned? And could you fall for someone like Han Suk-jin knowing the darkness they carry? Your next obsession awaits. Click the video on your screen now for another tale of forbidden passion, betrayal, and the thin line between salvation and damnation. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, remember, sometimes the most dangerous love stories are the ones we can't look away from.